David Fincher is by far one of my favorite directors. In fact, whenever I get asked for movie recommendations, I would go through a list of movies made by David Fincher and ask them which one they haven't seen yet, and just recommend the ones that they haven't seen. And over the years of watching his entire body of work repeatedly, as well as interviews, behind the scenes, as well as any sort of video essays that's out there on YouTube, I think I'm beginning to understand why he is my favorite director. It's not just his iconic steely palette and his cold camera movements, or his perfectionist directing style, multiple takes and attention to detail, or his deceptive use of CGI to aid a immersive world building and storytelling. I think it's everything. It's a combination of every single one of those things I just said, and more. And most importantly, how every single one of those elements are able to come together so harmoniously to create a final piece of work that I might just go as far as to say, perfect. But I think a better question is, why does he do it? Why does he do the things that he does? I think it has to do with one of the common themes that he focuses on throughout his films and in the way he approached filmmaking. And that is understanding human behavior. So David Fincher is what we call an auteur, which is essentially French for the word author. And in the context of filmmaking, this word auteur essentially refers to any filmmaker who has a very distinctive style or has a very strong creative control over the filmmaking process. For example, directors like Alfred Hitchcock, Christopher Nolan, Quentin Tarantino, Terrence Malick, David Lynch, Martin Scorsese, you get the point. However, unlike most auteurs who prefers writing the screenplays to their own films, which allows them to maintain a creative consistency across the narrative component of the film as well as the visual components of the film, David Fincher doesn't write his own movies. In fact, if we were to go through a list of films, even including Alien 3, which I personally don't think considers a film he directed, so that's Seven, Fight Club, The Game, Panic Room, Zodiac, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, The Social Network, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Gone Girl, and most recently, Mank. You'll notice that none of these films are written by him. To take this one step further, if you go to David Fincher's IMDb page, you notice that there's only 3 writing credits under his name for his entire filmmaking career. And all 3 of those are essentially creative advertisement pieces to showcase BMW cars. But I think there is a reason why he doesn't write his own films. I think that by not writing his own films, David Fincher can maintain an objective point of view when reading the script and shooting the film. So instead of trying to justify the characters' actions within the narrative, he sets out to understand these characters, what they're thinking, why they're doing what they're doing, and instead of creating the stories and characters, the filmmaking process becomes exploring who they are, exploring their psyche, and observing the actions, rather than telling the story from their perspective. A really good example of this is that during the 3-week rehearsal period for The Social Network, instead of rehearsing what the actors will be doing, Fincher instead sat down with Aaron Sorkin and the main cast in a room around a table, talking through every single scene, digging under every word, every line, trying to understand the story and the characters, their motivations and their behaviors.
The rehearsals were less about like rehearsing the scenes and or coming up with blocking or something like that. It was more about just like discussing the story as a whole, or I was interested to see how David was so focused on finding what was behind each word in the script and why it was there.
And this obsession with observing and understanding human behavior is also reflected in David Fincher's trademark camera work. Fincher's camera work is often regarded as precise, cold, and impersonal, often moving with such precision that it matches exactly the movement of the characters on screen. Nerdwriter has an incredible video on David Fincher's camera work called How David Fincher Hijacks Your Eyes, which is extremely worth watching, and I'll link it in the description below. Through the way David Fincher so precisely choreographs the movement of his cameras, using mostly dolly movements and almost never handheld shots, watching his movies will make you feel like an invisible spectator of the story world, observing the characters' every action and reaction as the story unfolds. It gives an extremely objective point of view of not just the characters, but the story as a whole. There's never any 360 hero shots, or shots that glorifies the actions of the protagonist or the antagonist. Because in Fincher's films, there's no good people or bad people. They're all just people. And if you think about it, the main character in all of his movies are never the chosen one or the good guys. They're always just people in circumstances. Even if in cases where they seem like the good guy, where they're a detective trying to catch a serial killer, they're still very much flawed in a very human way. This allows Fincher to create a world that feels grounded, It makes the characters feel extremely real and relatable, even if the premise of the story is fantastical. In one of the interviews with Robin Wright, who starred and directed House of Cards, where she talks about one piece of advice David Fincher gave her on directing House of Cards. And that one note David Fincher gave her is,
behavior over time.
I think this explains one of the biggest reasons as to why Fincher likes to do countless number of takes whenever he shoots a scene. While there is the reason of perfectionism, which I will touch on at the very end, where he wants to make sure that every single person on set is bringing their absolute A game, I think that the main benefit of taking many different takes is that it allows the actors to fully immerse themselves into the character and behave like how the characters would behave. Acting is a very nuanced art form. It's one of those things where the better you are at it, the less other people will see. Actors often spend hours studying the nuances of a script and trying to incorporate as much subtleties into their performances as possible.
Sorkin dialogue is hard.
Ultimately, the goal is to make the performance, well, for lack of a better word, feel natural. With a great performance, we as the audience will forget the fact that we're watching an actor acting, and instead we just see a person just being. And going back to Fincher, by doing countless number of takes, it actually gives the actors the room to consolidate the subtleties in their acting into behavior that feels natural, a behavior that doesn't feel like acting anymore, where the actions and dialogue become so baked into their muscle memory, the actors will no longer have to think about what they have to do. Instead, they can just be in the moment and react and behave given the situation the characters are in.
I want you to know exactly where to sit in that chair. I want you to be really comfortable because it's your home. And so you come in, you throw your coat on the couch. When you've done that 15 times, it starts to look like you live there.
Once an actor reaches that point, they might even bring to the table things that they weren't even aware of in the first few takes. Perhaps interesting behavior that just feel natural to the character. And that's where Fincher comes in. His job is to observe the characters, or rather provide a lens for the audience, for us, to observe these characters. Everything is about behavior. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, give it a thumbs up as it will help me reach more people on this platform. And before I wrap up the video, I just want to quickly touch on the perfectionist thing I talked about earlier. So remember in high school, whenever you write an English essay on a novel or a movie, your teacher would always ask you to like overanalyze every single detail. So in the case of David Fincher, because he's such a perfectionist, because there's so much attention to every single detail he puts on his film, you can trust that every single scene and every single shot that you see in the final movie, the final product, he meant it to be there. Which means his movies can withstand overanalyzing. And I think it's one of those cases where the more you dive deeper into analyzing every single shot and every single scene of his movies, the more you will take out as a viewer. And you will learn a lot as a filmmaker as well. Comment below on who your favorite director is and why they're your favorite director. I would love to start a discussion with you guys, make this into more of a back and forth. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So go enjoy your movies as always.